Whoa, where am I?
You're awake.
Yeah, I know. How else would I be talking like this? God.
Good point. Never thought of that.
Yeah, I know. I could tell. Wait a second. How am I here?
You fainted and then peed like a little baby, so I carried you back here.
Ugh, did you at least clean the pee off first?
Nah, I'm into that.
Of course you are.
Of course I am.
Okay, I'm confused here, though.
You often are.
I'm still in hell.
Yeah.
And I'm back in your cathedral, obviously.
Yeah.
Which doesn't look like a cathedral anymore. What's up with that?
We added some LEDs.
I don't really mean that. I mean, why does it have a glass skyscraper on it?
Oh, we needed more office space.
To do what?
Business.
What business?
I make rap songs using royalty-free beats I find on YouTube.
Oh, that's a lot less diabolical than I was expecting.
Well, that's not all of it.
What's the rest?
We wait till people use the beats.
Uh-huh.
And then we upload my songs to Content ID.
Oh, no.
And then copyright claim every video that used the beats and steal their monetization.
And with that, you could afford these upgrades.
Oh, much more. We're international. We're making $120 billion a year.
You realize I've had this problem on my videos, right? Random rappers using royalty-free beats and then copyright claiming my video that happens to use the same beat?
That was probably us.
I don't appreciate that.
Cost of doing business.
That phrase is supposed to refer to your cost of doing business, not other people's cost of your business.
Don't hate the player, hate the game.
Okay, that's enough. Now can I stay here or what? I'm tired of sleeping in that field. And it seems like you've got plenty of space. I should be able to sleep in one of the offices or something, right?
No, they're full. In fact, there are 5 employees per cubicle. We need to expand again, but you can sleep here.
Okay. If nothing else, there's a lot of millipedes to eat. A lot more than I remember.
We hired a bunch more of them, too.
Good thinking. Anyway, I'm getting a call in my new brain, so if you don't mind.
Alright, I'll wait right outside your door.
I'd rather you didn't.
It's okay. I'll do it anyway. No charge this time.
Really? In that case, okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
I'll get you some coupons for next time, too. 10% off.
That'd be incredible. I can't believe these savings. Bye-bye. Okay, yes, hello?
So this is what the outside looks like.
Weird. Bizarre color scheme. I don't know where you are, but I hope I never have to go there. Too much purple, or whatever color that is. I've been told I have trouble with this. I think I might need a new prescription.
This episode is going to be about providing 3 theist arguments.
Sounds fantastic. That's just what I wanted in my day. It's my favorite thing, other than most of the other things.
And these are arguments I feel like are more organic and are going to work better when you're trying to discuss something with an atheist.
Trying to discuss something. Like what?
So if you're just trying to argue with them, these aren't the best.
Okay, so these are good arguments unless you want to argue with them. And then you should use other ones. These are things you argue when you're not arguing, when you're only discussing something.
If you're just trying to shut down, these aren't the best.
You know what? I kind of want to see that video more than this one. Here are the best theist arguments to shut down the conversation.
But if you want to teach somebody something or let people know what you really believe, these are good rational arguments for theism.
If you just want to teach people something or tell them what you believe, why do you need like prepackaged arguments for that? Why would those take the form of argumentation at all? At that point, just tell me the thing that you want to tell me. Tossing a bunch of prepackaged arguments in my direction that you heard from this guy doesn't seem like it's going to do the job, regardless of what the arguments are.
And I'm about to tell you what those 3 are, and I'm going to end with the best one.
Of course you are. Got to get that watch time. The watch time metric is kind of annoying in that it makes people format their YouTube videos backwards. It's much nicer if the main point is right up front. Here's the best argument, and now here's some other slightly less good ones that maybe are applicable in certain cases, but would ideally not be the first ones you reach for. Wouldn't that be nice? Think about books. A lot of nonfiction books end up being kind of lacking or repetitive or excessively detail-oriented in the second half, and that's because it's a book. Books aren't measuring your read time. Once the reader has the book in their hands, that's it. The job's done. You might as well just front-load it as much as you can with the best stuff. Explain the big main idea and all the support that's going to get people on board with it, and run out of steam after 150 pages and realize you have to pack in 150 more for your publisher, or spend the second half of the book going into the stuff that only the very interested are really going to care about. But no, on YouTube, we're stuck with the last minute of this video will blow your mind.
So the first one is, when you look at the universe, it's actually strangely empty. And when you talk to scientists, they can't help but admit this. Given everything we know about life, there should be some stuff going on.
There should be stuff, life stuff. Okay, sure, maybe. And maybe there is. It's kind of odd to say the universe just is strangely empty when the level of access we have to the rest of the universe in terms of detecting life similar to Earth life, stuff going on that's like anything that we see going on here, is basically zero. I wouldn't expect to be detecting that. And yes, I know about the Fermi paradox and the Drake equation, which I've never found very compelling as a reason to be surprised by the current situation. You'll probably bring that up yourself, so I won't get into that right now.
When people joke about aliens abducting people and probing them and doing all these things, that actually should be happening.
If there's lots of life in the universe, then aliens should be coming to Earth, sucking people up into spaceships and sticking things in their butts. Why? Even if there were interstellar aliens, why would that be a priority?
When you think about how many planets should be habitable in the universe the way the scientists explain it.
I'm going to pause right here just to say, I don't think this guy's AI, in case anyone was thinking that from that weird pause. I've seen a few of his videos. He's pretty obviously human. I think that was just a momentary short circuit.
And then given the variation in the technology, which means some civilizations should be around where we are maybe, but most are going to be a lot further advanced. We're actually in some kind of infancy when you look at the growth of technology, which means in the past 100 years, in the past 10 years, we've seen technology grow at a much higher rate than it has in the past. Given that, we're at the beginning. So that's logically the beginning. And if that's logically the beginning, then most civilizations are going to have higher technology. There's just not a lot of sentient, cognitive, conscious beings out there. They're going to be way back where we are, where we haven't even improved the toilet. It's a hole in the ground still.
You shut your mouth. The American toilet is perfect. I will not hear this slander of the toilet. Now, if you were talking about the German toilet with the poop shelf that you have to clean every time you take a dump, you might have a point, but that is not what we're talking about here. And if you're talking about the Japanese toilet with all the bleeping and the blooping, no, it's too much. It's overwhelming. I just want to poop in peace. Now, having dealt with the most important part first, which as I said is my preference, let's deal with the rest. Now, as you said, we may well be in a sort of technological infancy. It's very possible that although we've had a lot of technological advancement in the past couple centuries, we ain't seen nothing yet. But what that also means is we don't really know what the possibilities even are. We don't know how much further we can go. Physics presumably imposes limitations, and so presumably there also is some level of technological advancement beyond which you simply cannot pass physically. Where is that level and when will we hit it? Dunno. When we hit it, will it be at some level that makes interstellar travel practical? In other words, is interstellar travel practical? Well, we don't know that either. We tend to dream big, and in recent history, we have this techno-optimism that tends to lead us to assuming that we can do anything at all that we want, that overcoming any problem at all is simply a matter of putting in enough work and willpower. But it's still far from guaranteed that that can happen. And what throws more wrenches into those gears is the fact that whatever advancement we make and whatever enormous, unbelievably huge projects that we do in the future are going to rely on the social situation on the ground. Going to the moon was an enormous project, but this is a lot bigger than that. It's going to take an obscene amount of collaboration and enormous quantities of resources and interest. We're unlikely to throw away all that potentially useful stuff for no benefit. And sure, maybe in the future we'll stop caring about what the benefit of anything is, but then why would we do anything in the first place? Humans do things based on incentives, real or perceived. And in fact, that seems common among all animals. We're all striving for survival and reproduction and the resources that enable that. That's how life works. And I would see it as a near certainty that that attitude would be present in animals on any other planet, because they would have gone through the same general kind of evolutionary process as we have. That's what we're talking about, is organisms evolving in parallel, going through a sort of similar trajectory to what we've seen on Earth. That's what this whole conversation is about. So would those organisms care about developing technology to such an extent that they could travel between the stars? I don't know. Would they care about actually bothering to do it, enough to do more than make science fiction movies about it? I also don't know. And then, of course, there's the big question of, is it common for organisms to get to that level of technological development without either their technology or themselves going extinct? Again, hard to say. How much of a doomer are you on AI? And if not that, then how much of a doomer are you on literally every technology we ever conceivably could invent ever? Even if we don't do it on purpose, if we get to the point where we're dealing with really high energy levels, or just technology with really extreme second-order effects that maybe are hard to foresee, how long is it until we make a really bad mistake? And how likely or unlikely is it that other organisms on other planets might do the same? Tough question, hard to answer. I better let you talk a bit more before I continue.
So my point is, the world is empty. Given what we know, we should have aliens visiting I don't know, every Tuesday.
Okay, so this is the problem with this kind of stuff, is that there's so many assumptions built in about how life works, how the universe is, that I have a really hard time understanding how people think it tells them something with confidence. Like, is life like ours common in the universe? It's probably not very common. It's very uncommon on Earth. There's no sign of other symbol-thinking, complex language-using, high-technology developing creatures existing in the entire history of this planet prior to us. Clearly, there's a niche for us, but it seems very hard to fill. Nevertheless, it has been filled, so we could just treat this as an assumption and say any given planet with life that develops for a sufficiently long amount of time could be expected to evolve organisms that fill a similar sort of niche to ours. That's far from a sure thing in my opinion, but I don't have a problem with at least just saying that for the sake of argument. At least we know that organisms that think like us are possible. We have an example of them existing. Interstellar travel, though, to me that's such a huge uncertainty that I wouldn't be able to put any number on that. If you said, put a number on that, how likely is that to happen? I don't know, between 0 and somewhat more than 0. And if it came out that it leaned heavily towards 0, I would not be all that surprised. But still, I'm not going to put a number on it. And then for some reason, we're assuming that these aliens should show up at Earth specifically. But why is that some sort of inevitability? Do we or our planet offer something special? I mean, this argument is kind of relying on our planet not being special. So what's the point of coming here? If anything, they'd probably be out there mining or something. It seems strange to me to assume that they would come here just 'cause. But having said that, are they not coming here? I mean, we both seem to be in agreement that we don't find the evidence for UFOs and alien abductions very compelling. But nevertheless, the corpus of evidence that we do have for it at least rivals the evidence for religious miracles. And a lot of people find one or the other or both sets of evidence compelling. You talk about this as if it's just not happening at all, but there are people out there who will insist that they're the one the aliens took. As you said, they should be coming pretty much every week. Well, there's a new claim about this at least every week. Now, you're telling me that the obvious lack of alien abductions and probings is somehow evidence for God. This is supposed to be an argument for God. But I would find it a lot less surprising that alien abductions happen than that God exists. So if I bought into this argument, I would be much more likely to say, okay, then aliens are coming to Earth, than to say, okay, God exists. That's assuming, of course, that at some point you actually set up a connection between the presence of aliens and the existence of God, which I would be amazed if you can do convincingly.
We should be able to spot them with these telescopes that look into other solar systems and potentially other galaxies.
Well, no, you shouldn't be able to spot them. I assume you're not talking about literally seeing them. You're talking about detecting some sort of radio signal from them or some other kind of signal that we could detect. Now, of course, that relies on us actually doing it and knowing what we're looking for. And there have been attempts to do that have found nothing. But does that mean there is no signal? I don't think so. These searches are far from completely thorough, even with regard to the technology that we already have. And if, as you posit, most civilizations are far advanced beyond us, who's to say they're using any of the primitive stuff that we have? We haven't even improved the toilet, allegedly. What are these highly advanced interstellar civilizations gonna transmit in radio like a bunch of primitives? They're probably sending messages through wormholes and shit, assuming even that's not highly primitive. And even if they were, how do we know we're looking for the right thing that they're sending? The whole thing is based on guesswork. And then, of course, why are we assuming that they're sending out strong enough signals for us to detect from across a galaxy or in another galaxy, which I don't think you quite appreciate just how strong of a signal that would have to be detectable. But like, if they're using signals to communicate amongst each other, and that's what we're trying to detect, very possibly it's not going to be a very strong signal. And of course, inverse square law, that signal is going to degrade with distance. Plus, if these civilizations are aware of each other's existence because they're way advanced beyond us, maybe they're trying to hide their signals from each other. We can rely right now on things like encryption, but that may become untenable with future technology like quantum computing. So maybe they shield their entire solar system in a Dyson sphere. Don't allow any signals out, because that could potentially invite threats. There are so many possibilities here because we're talking in science fiction terms, and thus there's really no conclusion that you can reach to any satisfactory degree of confidence. It's fun to talk about, but in practical terms, it's a waste of time. And it can't be used as the foundation of some argument for anything, really. If you use a conclusion that you've drawn from this as the premise for some other argument, the soundness of that premise is going to be at best extremely dubious. So what are we doing here?
Spot them with these telescopes that look into other solar systems and potentially other galaxies. I don't know. I'm not a cosmologist
Wouldn't that be more of an astronomer or maybe an astrobiologist?
or cosmetologist or whatever it's called, and I don't care.
Okay, I get that the cosmetologist thing was a joke, but I can believe that you don't care. I mean, you're talking about seeing aliens that live in other galaxies with a telescope. It's pretty clear that you don't have a firm grasp on the subject that you would get if you cared. But if you have no understanding or interest in the topic, why are you using it as some sort of argument for something? Approaching this in ignorance gives you a very good chance of winding up with an argument that makes very little sense and does nothing. What's the point of doing that?
I don't get my stuff right. It just doesn't happen.
Okay, then who cares about your stuff? I care about arguments that are based on stuff that people do get right.
What I'm telling you is the world's empty. That's not me doing it. That's a fact.
How would you know? You don't care. Not that you'd know if you did, either. This is not a settled question. Far from it. Also, do we have to use the word world to refer to the entire universe? Could we update the lingo to the 18th century?
And it shouldn't be this empty.
Well, again, you don't know that. There are countless ways of resolving the Fermi paradox, beyond the ones that I've talked about. I just threw out a few options off the top of my head for the taste of it. Consider others yourself or go look them up. You don't have to go far, you don't have to dig deep for this. Wikipedia has a huge list which is entirely sufficient. So regardless of what argument you're planning to make here, I reject your premise because it's inadequately supported.
What is one explanation? That it is more man-focused, that it is more focused on what's going on here on Earth, and that this is something unique. And the way the natural world is explained, this shouldn't be this unique.
Okay, obviously I disagree that the situation implies that it is unique. But sure, it being unique is one possible solution. Possibly intelligent life is far less likely than tends to be assumed, and thus is exceedingly rare or unique. And now I think I see where you're going with this, so sure, possibly, if intelligent life is exceedingly rare or unique, maybe there's some spark there beyond natural processes that's needed to bring it about. But see, the problem with all of that is that needs to be supported. That's multiple implicit claims, and none of them is inherently privileged over any other resolution of the Fermi paradox that I've brought up or that anyone else ever has. And positing supernatural causation just because an event happens to be rare is something that would have to be supported on its own. There would have to be some reason to go beyond just, it's an event that's uncommon because the circumstances in which it arises are themselves uncommon. The mere fact of something being uncommon does not imply that it's supernatural.
That's really the conclusion. Number 2.
Wait, seriously? That's where we're stopping? You're not even going to follow it through to therefore God. You're just going with intelligent life seems rare. Maybe that's because there's a God who really only cares about humanity and Earth. Okay, maybe. Why should I think that's in any way likely? Even if I accept that intelligent life is exceedingly rare, or in fact, even if I accept that it's unique to Earth, that doesn't make your preferred explanation by default the most likely one of all possibilities. An argument for God is supposed to narrow the possibilities down to God. It's supposed to make it at least seem like the most likely option. But you've left the field wide open here without giving any extra weight to your proposed explanation. So how can it be an argument for God? It's not an argument for anything. So I guess there's nothing else I have to say about it. Fair enough. Moving on. Number 2.
The fact we haven't blown each other up with nukes.
What? Okay, then we have twice.
What does that even mean?
I have no idea what you mean. You tell me. It's your argument. I hope this one at least points in any way to God. That'd be nice, but I can already tell it won't.
How do you understand how humans act in every other walk of life? And then you give them these bombs that can immediately win wars. They've been in wars ever since it was invented in 1944, 1945. We've had wars every year somewhere. Obviously, we have 10 going on right now.
I don't know if 10 is the right number. I don't really care. I'm not going to look it up. That's too nitpicky.
No one's ever nuked anybody.
Uh,
Other than those first 2 nukes dropped on Japan, never been another nuke used in a war.
Okay. Whew, had me worried there for a second. Okay, sure. Yeah, great.
No rogue country. The United States didn't do it for the same reasons as World War II, to stop a war that's going to end up killing more people than the nuke did. There wasn't even pragmatic usage, which means measuring the cost-benefit analysis and it really being commonsensical to use it at that point. Nothing. No nukes.
Okay, so what's the approach that I'm going to take here? Am I going to go through the entire history of the Cold War, nuclear deterrence and all that, in every country that's ever had a nuke? No. I guess what I'll open with here is that sometimes I see this conspiracy theory floating around that nukes are just like government scaremongering and they don't actually exist. It's just this tool of either social control or governments trying to scare each other. I guess the details kind of depend on which conspiracy theorist you're asking. And, I gotta say, as silly as that seems, it's a lot more plausible of an explanation than that God is holding the president's finger off the button, which I assume is where this is headed. If anything, this is an argument supporting that kind of thing more so than theism. But of course, the other possibility is just that the cost-benefit analysis that you mentioned there is performed regularly, and it's found to not be worth it for any number of reasons, in terms of retaliation or reputational damage or economic consequences or what have you, because whatever those governments happen to want is not worth as much as the cost, and they can do it in other ways anyway. What about any of this seems implausible to the point where you have to start positing supernatural explanations? It seems odd to me to try to base an argument on rejecting human-based explanations for human behavior. We already have sufficient and simple enough explanations here, so what use is it to try to jam in this other one?
We've got these nukes. We've got everyone pissed off. We've got warfare everywhere. No one's used to nuke. Why is that? Just from the outside. Don't overanalyze this.
Okay, but can we at least normal analyze it? There have been entire books written on the history of why the attitudes are as they are, why the decisions were made as they were, the various close calls and what was done to resolve them. Again, human explanations for human behavior. That's what analysis would imply happened. But we're supposed to just go, I don't know, that feels weird. I'm not going to overanalyze this. Must be God.
I'm an expert at not overanalyzing. That's why you're watching.
Okay, I can't argue with that, actually. I probably would not have picked this video if you weren't so good at just saying random stuff you haven't really thought about.
I could underanalyze a popsicle.
Yeah, and then pretend somehow it points to God. Make that video. I'll watch it.
So the point is, when you look at the world in terms of military, warfare, conflict globally, when you look at these things, there's actually a term for it. Geopolitics, I think. I don't even know what that means.
Why are you making this video? You're like, when you look at this thing that I haven't looked at all, and I have no idea about, and I don't even know what it's called, it's pretty obvious that the history couldn't have just gone down for history reasons. This argument and the last one, you're like, I have no idea what I'm talking about, but let me make an argument based on it anyway. A better option would be to not, because there's no way for this to go well without divine intervention, which clearly is not happening.
The point is, no one's used a nuke. It's not that hard to grasp.
Okay, I grasp it. I've grasped that no one used a nuke since 1945. Wow, you're right. It isn't that hard. Okay, now what?
It should have happened.
Should have according to what? Like that it's some kind of physical or social inevitability? Why? You're not justifying it at all. You're saying, well, it's not that hard to grasp. Well, actually, it's pretty hard to grasp what you think is inevitable about this. Especially because that would require me to make your argument for you. This is your argument. You're supposed to provide the information necessary to lead me to the conclusion that you want me to reach, and you haven't started. You're just berating me. You're saying this should have happened. It's obvious. It's not hard to grasp. What's the problem? Well, the problem is you haven't made an argument beyond just expressing incredulity. But I already understand that you're incredulous about this. That's not in dispute. Reiterating that provides no new information about you or your mental state, neither of which is relevant to the argument anyway.
There should have been accidents. There should have been problems.
Okay, weird. Here I was thinking you were talking about intentional attacks with nuclear weapons because that's what you were talking about. And now all of a sudden it's, well, there haven't been accidents or problems. Suddenly the argument's about that now. You're mixing up two very different categories of event. But there have been accidents and problems. The United States government calls them broken arrow incidents. In one of them, at the Kirkland Air Force Base in New Mexico in 1957, a B-36 accidentally dropped a nuclear bomb. The high explosives in it detonated, creating a crater 25 feet across. But fortunately, the nuclear capsule, although on the plane, was not in the weapon, and there couldn't have been a nuclear detonation. Basic safety precautions save the day. In another one, in Goldsboro, North Carolina in 1961, a B-52 bomber exploded and released a couple of the nuclear bombs that it was carrying. On one of the bombs, 3 out of 4 arming devices activated. But fortunately, there was another arming device, which was a switch that the pilot would normally have hit, which was not activated. Furthermore, a parachute was activated to ensure a soft landing, and the second bomb wasn't armed, it just hit the ground and smashed to pieces. So design saves the day. And of course, that's the key when we're talking about accidents, is these things are designed to not go off by accident for obvious reasons. Nobody in any government wants accidents with nuclear weapons to happen, and it serves nobody if they do. You seem to be planning to credit God with good engineering and safety protocols.
There isn't enough problems associated with the rise of the nuclear weapon.
Okay, so how many accidents and or intentional nuclear attacks have to happen for it to count as enough to you and therefore discredit this argument in your mind? Does there have to be an accidental nuclear detonation? Would that even be enough problems? Enough is really not a very clear metric. But, this argument that basically whatever destructive technology is at our disposal should inevitably be used and we should blow ourselves up is an argument that people bring up against your first argument. The idea that maybe sooner or later, species just end up blowing themselves up. No matter how hard they try not to, no matter how long they succeed, eventually the technology is too potentially destructive and somebody's going to decide to use it. If it applies to us, why not to the aliens? We're all going through roughly similar evolutionary processes. That's kind of the point of the argument. We're following through these stages of becoming intellectual, becoming highly advanced technologically, and we all have these kind of similar goals and ambitions, wanting to travel between the stars, wanting to acquire more, explore. We seem like very similar organisms, really, in proposed behavior, in which case if you think this is something that we're prone to do, it probably applies to them too.
Nuclear weapon in whatever form, whether it's this large ballistic missile, whether it's a tactical nuke. Nothing. Zero. And I'm not saying, knock on wood, I hope no one uses it. That's not my point. I think we should end all these stupid wars for nothing because they're dumb. The point is nukes. That was really sophisticated, wasn't it?
No, of course, that's the problem. None of this is sophisticated. This is not sophisticated argumentation. You have the most tenuous of feelsy premises, and you expect that to just kind of lead to God because you want it to. But there's nothing about this that points in that direction, at least not to the exclusion of other explanations which are much simpler and more realistic.
No one's used a nuke. That's a pretty powerful argument when you look at it rationally.
Is it? Nuclear attacks and accidents haven't happened, except those first 2 times, but ignore that. But otherwise, they haven't happened for a while. How could that happen? Don't overanalyze it. God did it. That's a powerful argument? In what way does this argument even point to that specific conclusion other than that's just what you're going to say the conclusion is? What about this seems rational to you?
When you separate it from the scientific scientism that overanalyzes everything. You don't need to overanalyze it. No one's used it.
So if you look at it rationally and ignore science and over-analysis, whatever that means, and you just don't think about it all that much, then, therefore God seems like a good argument. Yeah, that's often the case, that if you don't think, bad arguments seem good. That doesn't really speak in its favor.
Except those two, nothing.
Except the time that it happened and the other time that it happened, it didn't happen, not even once.
How? Something's keeping us from doing it?
Yeah, there's a lot of things keeping us from doing it. Things that are documented. You could go read about them, but you don't want to.
Or there's some force.
That too. Force is a factor.
Or there's some fated situation.
Fated? Oh, fated. Okay, great. So how are we going to make the fate's decree that we do not use or have accidents with nukes seem more probable than the stuff we already know about? Because that's the point of an argument.
I'm not saying I believe any of this stuff. What I'm telling you is these are arguments. That's number 2.
No, you're not just telling me these are arguments. You're telling me these are really good arguments for theism, specifically for the existence of God. And now you're like, oh, well, I don't believe any of this stuff. I don't believe it's a force or fate or whatever. Great. I don't care what you believe is happening. You think these arguments are good and they're not. And that's funny. That's it. Anyway, I know he said at the start that his third argument is his best one, but I listened to it, it's like twice as long as either of these 2 arguments, despite having about as little actual content. Basically, it's just consciousness. That's a thing. Atheists can't explain that. That's scientism. And sorry, but it's long and tedious and I've heard it before, whereas these first 2 were at least something fresh. So I'm gonna stop here because I like the video how it is. So thank you for watching. I guess I'll just camp out here for a while. At least I have a roof over my head now. I don't have to sleep out in the blood rain, although the roof of this room does leak. I'll try to find a bucket or something. But for the moment, subscribe, like, thank you so much to my supporters. See you later.